Digital media technologies, such as instant messaging or video telephony, enable social interactions despite spatial distance, which allows people to establish and uphold relationships. Our day to day lives are intertwined with virtual augmentations. Whether we like it or not, we've been steadily curating and meshing into digital bodies. VR chat's an application that's been very interesting to me lately. It's basically an application where people can use virtual reality and create avatars to interact with other people all over the world. Think Club Penguin or Habbo, but make it immersive. According to the people at VRChat, they define it as offering an endless collection of social VR experiences by giving the power of creation to its community. So, what exactly does that entail? What the hell is even VR? How did we get here? And who is this beautiful young lady that's explaining all of this to me? Alright, looks like it's time for a little history lesson. First things first, virtual reality. Virtual reality systems in this specific context will be defined as head-mounted immersive systems that use stereopsis in order to simulate depth perception. According to Oxford Language, stereopsis is the perception of depth produced by the reception in the brain of visual stimuli from both eyes in combination. Simply put, humans have two eyes that we use to perceive the world. The reason why we're able to perceive depth is because our eyes see the same image but from slightly different positions. Our brain combines those two images and gives us the ability to perceive depth. Virtual reality systems mimic that by projecting the images that are shown exactly the way we would see them in real life, through a split screen with 3D images projected at slightly different positions. That, combined with head tracking and spatial audio, and you're immersed in virtual reality. The idea of virtual reality has been toyed with for decades. However, the rubric of this assignment says to keep the history brief. So I'm just going to cover the major moments in VR history relating to head-mounted gaming systems, starting in 1993 with the anticipated release of Sega's VR glasses. 1994, following year, Sega released the Sega VR1. Moving right along to Nintendo's Virtual Boy in 1995. All of these iterations proved to be ultimately unsuccessful. But that all changed in 2010 when Palmer Luckey, who was 18 at the time, announced the Oculus Rift prototype. This prototype was groundbreaking. 2 years later, Luckey raises $2.5 million in Kickstarter funds, and 2 years after that, Oculus was acquired by Meta. And here is when all the other companies started to fall in line. Sony, HTC, and Valve began to release their own VR headsets alongside Meta and Oculus. Class is dismissed. So, virtual reality. It simulates our reality and makes it virtual. The thing is, simulating or imitation of life as we know it isn't anything new. In fact, the way that we create anything ever is usually done in this way. Philosopher Plato coined the term mimesis to explain this phenomenon. According to Plato, all artistic creation is a form of imitation. That which really exists in the world of ideas is a type created by God. The concrete things man perceives in his existence are shadowy representations of this ideal type. Therefore, the painter, the tragedian, and the musician are imitators of an imitation twice removed from the truth. But in the 21st century, we've gotten to a point where our simulations of real life are quickly becoming nearly indistinguishable from what is being imitated. And while Plato may not have been able to even imagine the level of imitation we've been able to achieve, researchers who are alive now still apply the same principles of artistic creation being a form of imitation. For example, the journal article Corporeal Interactions in VR Chat states that with proximity audio, eye tracking, lip syncing, full body motion capture, and interfaces for haptic integration, the richness of expression and perception in social VR increases by mirroring physical interactional qualities. If you've ever used a VR headset before, you know how immersive the technology really can be. People all over the internet have posted videos of people using VR headsets and reacting to the simulated environment as if they were really inside of whatever program was being projected. There's actually a reason for this. According to Vox's YouTube video, How Virtual Reality Tricks Your Brain, about 80% of all the information we perceive in our environment is based on our vision. And because of that, our brain will take all of this new virtual stimuli and begins to believe that this is our reality. Remember in our history lesson, we learned how virtual reality systems use a split screen that projects three-dimensional images, replicating how our eyes work in real life. On top of that, with the integration of spatial audio, the major senses that help us experience the real world before us are being mirrored and presented to us as a kind of second reality. It's so good that our brains can't even tell the difference. We've gotten to the point that 2 out of 5 of our senses are able to be replicated almost perfectly. The only thing that's missing for us to literally be transported into our computer screens is if we were able to find a way to include the other 3: touch, smell, and taste.
You can feel a tingly sensations, you can feel cold, warm, you can feel pain, you can smell stuff. For me, if I'm hugging someone, I feel pressure.
Okay, so it turns out we're already there. I'm sure you've heard of phantom limb before, and if you haven't, here's a quick description. As you can see, experts don't really know exactly why this happens. I bring this up because it's the only example I can think of that's close enough to phantom sense. Players of the popular game VR Chat have reported feeling sensations from interacting with other players in the game. Technically, or scientifically, or even logically, this shouldn't be possible. But it is. It's almost like our brains can just fill in the blanks. Could it really be possible to seamlessly recreate human existence to the point where there's no distinction between the two? In preparation for this video essay, I watched a documentary called We Met in Virtual Reality. The documentary is completely shot inside of the world of VR Chat, and its purpose was to showcase interpersonal relationships and all the different forms of interaction within the game. It featured couples that met and had entire relationships inside the world of VR Chat, virtual marriages, players who took classes teaching things like sign language or belly dancing, New Year celebrations, and honestly, some really heartfelt and emotional moments within it. Full disclosure, I'm normally a skeptic of things like this. I don't really like AI, and I fear that there might be a robot uprising in the near future. But after I watched this documentary, it really changed my perspective on how these new technologies function and what they could do for society. The way I continued my line of research following the documentary is what led me to the title Digital Bodies. What's really interesting about VR Chat is that while it's still fairly new, users have been able to immerse themselves in it almost perfectly. Dragora, the Phantom Sense guy, is even quoted as saying,
Sometimes I'm so focused, I forget that there's a real me.
It seems that while people are in a state of immersion, the lines between flesh body and digital body become increasingly blurred. Like if the two entities are not totally separate, but rather the avatar serves as an extension of the worldly self. Or, as Krell and Wetman put it, coextensive space contains bodies that can feel fragmented and doubled at the same time. When you're experiencing something that mimics the way you hear sound naturally, and the way that you see the world from your own two eyes all simultaneously, it's not surprising that it's difficult to tell from what's real and what's not. And who's to say what real really is anyway? The simulation argument, created by Nick Bostrom, says that we are almost certainly living in a simulation. Don't believe me? Here's a clip of him saying it himself.
Obtained, then there will be many more simulated people like us than there will be non-simulated people like us. In other words, almost all people with our kinds of experiences would be living inside simulations rather than outside them, if the first two possibilities are false. And conditional on that, we should therefore think we are probably one of the typical simulated people rather than one of the exceptional non-simulated people.
The reason I bring simulation argument in at this point of the video is to illustrate the idea that this reality of ours is fickle at best. Simulation argument maintains that although we may be simulated, we hold a level of free will and intelligence to run simulations of our own. If the human experience can be simulated, and if there is substantial evidence that supports the idea that our reality as we know it may actually be a simulation, then what's to say we couldn't make a full-time transition?
Hi. For the next week, I'm going to be eating, sleeping, working, and playing in virtual reality. Starting now.
YouTuber Jack Wilmot, also known as Disrupt, conducted an experiment where he spent an entire week inside the world of VR. He was still able to live his life as normal. He still answered emails and watched Netflix before bed. He went to social gatherings and even visited the African savannah for a while. Being in the headset was really just an addition. It didn't really change much. And besides the simulation argument, we have proof that using a hybrid model of reality mixed with virtual reality is possible because we've done it before. Think about COVID. There were hybrid learning models, and even now, a lot of jobs have transitioned to either hybrid or fully remote formats. And yes, I know, there are a lot of negative mental health, social, and developmental impacts from lessening human interaction, but based on what we've seen so far, it seems that with immersive realities, those factors will eventually become non-factors. Actually, a lot of the participants in We Met in Virtual Reality spoke about how the connections made in the game felt even more genuine and fulfilling than real-life interactions because the physical aspect was removed. Users felt like getting to know people based off of just their personalities without having to worry about any external factors was beneficial, and I believe them. I mean, like I said before, there are couples having entire weddings inside of the world of VR chat. So what does this look like in the future? Realistically speaking, I don't have all the answers. But I do know that with the climate crisis, that our days on this earth are limited. Urban sprawl and commutes to work have increased carbon emissions into our atmosphere significantly. If one day we are able to make the transition into an augmented version of life that allows us to submerge our daily tangible lives into a more digital model, would it really be that bad? I understand that we may not be at that point yet, but it could be a form of adaptation to unfavorable circumstances should we ever need it. Even if we don't get to that point, there are still a lot of benefits that can come from the usage of virtual reality systems. For example, VR headsets have been being used as pain management technologies for hospital patients, and they've been shown to help alleviate pain significantly. Similarly, using immersive VR technologies as an educational supplement would be revolutionary. It's incredibly more useful to be taught how to do surgery in an immersive setting than to be taught about it in a textbook. On the other hand, there is the issue of digital divides. As it stands currently, these virtual reality devices are extremely pricey, which makes them not exactly accessible to a good portion of the population. There's also the possibility that we could end up like the folks in WALL-E and live completely immersed in blissfully ignorant lives. I don't have the ability to tell you the future. But with the way that stuff's looking now, who knows? Maybe one day I'll be able to. But for now, all we can do is speculate with the information that's available to us. Like with anything, I encourage you to do your own research and make decisions that work for you. With that being said, my job here is done.